Hello everybody, it's AJ back again for another monster video. This week I went for a jaunt out into the plane of Limbo, if you can call it that. Now imagine if right back at the start of the D&D universe, all of the gods got together and they had a sandpit full of rough sand, and what they did was they smoothed it out and they pushed everything that was on the rough sand off to the sides, while they were having a great big fight, bickering and arguing over what creation should look like. And so quite a few of the gods got killed, and they got brushed off the board and thrown over to the side as well. And in that brushed off bit, that side, that cleared space, all of the leftover stuff from the universe is the plane of Limbo. It's a barrier plane between the prime material plane and all the other weirder, more pure or esoteric planes of the universe. And it contains all sorts of stuff. Junk, detritus of the universe, bits from all the different planes of existence, and it's a chaotic place without any sort of fixed up or down or immutable physical laws. So in the plane of Limbo, many things can happen. You can have whole worlds floating in Limbo that seem completely normal in a certain sense. You can have planes of rock and stuff just floating in space. Old dead gods, which have got Githyanki or the Githyanki's fortresses built upon them, and really huge macabre cities floating in space, with red dragons flying around. You can have fortress citadels flying through what looks like to be clouds of vaporous gas, like nebula. And it's a cool place, and it's the home dimension of the creature which I'm going to be talking about, which is the Slaad, or Slaadi. Now, Slaadi are a primordial race of basically parasites that have made a living pretty much around the borders of the blood war between the demons and the devils, the Tanari and the Batizu. And they're the stock and trade of the Planescape universe, or Planescape setting. And if you want a really good video from a Planescape point of view, go to the Gentleman Gamers video on this race, this monster, that I'll link down below. It's really good, and he does it in character and talks in Planescape talk, which is great. But yeah, here's my interpretation of the Slaad. So they're an interesting creature because they're really pure in what they do, and they're disorganized. So if they were organized, they would be a powerful force of evil and conquest in the multiverse. But as it is, they just basically are in a stage of their evolution where they propagate and propagate and propagate, and get killed off quite often because they like chaos and conflict and battle, and they have a means of reproduction which is reprehensible to most civilized races, and they are killed on sight pretty much. There is no race that I can think of really that gets on very well with the Slaadi. So what are they? What do they do? Well, they've got an interesting life cycle for one thing, and they harken a lot to a Geiger-esque alien encounter where they reproduce by parasitic infection. So you've got the different types of Slaadi are differentiated by their skin color, and their attitude and means of reproducing is slightly different, and also their level of intelligence is different. Now, the Slaad don't talk; they don't generally speak common. They have their own language called Slaad, and telepathy. So much like an earlier episode of like Star Trek or something, they would talk, or even Star Wars, they would talk in their own language, and you would understand what they were saying inexplicably. Like the words coming out of their mouth would be nonsensical, but you would have the images forming in your brain of what they were actually saying, and they can understand you in the simplest sort of way. They understand what you're thinking, not what you're saying. So yeah, that's pretty handy. Now, the red Slaad and the blue Slaad are the base breed, the base of and they're by far the most common. 90% of the time you will encounter these things, either red or blue. And they generally don't like each other very much at all, but they are inextricably bound together, because a red Slaad generates a blue Slaad when it reproduces, and a blue Slaad generates a red Slaad when it reproduces. So the red Slaad are bestial maniacs who attack you with their wicked claws and bite attack, and they have a gland under their claw which allows them to inject a miniature offspring, a spawn, a tadpole, a spore, into the target on a 25% chance generally. So in 5th edition D&D, you have to make a DC 14 Constitution saving throw, or be infected with a disease, a minuscule Slaad egg. And the humanoid host can carry one Slaad egg to term at a time. Over 3 months, the egg moves into the chest cavity, gestates and forms a Slaad tadpole, and in a 24-hour period before giving birth, the host starts to feel really, really unwell. Speed's halved, and it's a disadvantage on all attack rolls and ability checks and saving throws. The birth of the tadpole is horrific because it chews its way through vital organs and bursts through the chest, a la Alien. And generally speaking, that will kill the host. If the disease is cured before the tadpole's emergence, the unborn Slaad is disintegrated, and in order to do that, you have to use a remove curse or a cure disease spell, or I suppose a greater restoration type spell would fix that. Similar sort of thing with blue Slaad. They've got these hooks which protrude from the back of its hands, and they inject with that wicked hook a disease called a phage, a chaos phage. And what happens is you don't know that you've got the disease until a few months have passed, at which point you start to transform into a red Slaad. And you are physically transformed, so the destruction of your body, mind, and spirit is complete. And yeah, there's no hope for you. Basically, same sort of thing though. Remove curse or disease or great restoration will fix you. But you need to know that you're infected with this disease before. And so, because it is counterable, what happens is the red and the blue Slaad will take their victims away and intern them in prison camps while they're infected, so that nobody can get at them and stop the transformation in its tracks. This is just a basic survival instinct for them, and it also allows them to divide out the red and blue Slaad that are born this way and put them in their proper camp with their own kind, because they don't tolerate their own offspring. Their own offspring are reprehensible assholes from the other race that they don't like, so they shun them. However, every now and then the Slaad will come across a magic user, somebody who can cast 3rd level or higher spells, and they prize them because there is a very good chance that when they inject them with one of their spawn, whether it's a red or a blue Slaad, the offspring will be a green Slaad, kind of a combination of the two traits. Now, green Slaad are intelligent, highly boastful braggarts who do their best to use their intelligence to further the ends of the Slaad race. They're also fairly curious, and they like to explore other cultures and races, and they exhibit the ability of Slaad to shape change. So they can polymorph into a small or medium humanoid, or back into its true form as a Slaadi, and they can basically maintain this as long as they want. So you could be talking to a green Slaad when you're talking to somebody on the prime material plane, or in the City of Doors sigil, or even the City of Brass, somewhere exotic. And this individual, who looks very much like a person from your own plane of existence, would have a striking lack of familiarity with the basic things that most humanoids would take for granted, because it's a green Slaad and it's never seen a tree or something like that. Anyway, so they have innate spell casting as well, being able to detect magic, detect thoughts, use Mage Hand, and they exhibit the ability to exert their will through fear, and generating energy to cast fireballs, and the ability to turn invisible. And they have magic resistance, so they have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects, even if it's a magical environment. And they have regeneration, like most of the Slaad, all of the Slaad have the ability to regenerate 10 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point. So they're pretty hard to put down. Right. Okay, so now we concentrate on what happens with the green Slaad. Now, the green Slaad have an interesting ability to transform and metamorphose over their life, and I like to think of them like Time Lords because they can take on. They just live and generate new identities. So once a green Slaad has travelled outside of Limbo and become a more active player in the worldly events of the Slaad, and more interested in the propagation of their race by marshalling forces of green and the red and the blue. Now the red and the blue of course respect the green Slaad and look to them for leadership automatically, because they realise that they're basically bestial and are really only driven by their base desires. So the green Slaad have a more foresight and better grasp of tactics. So if you're a red or a blue Slaad, hanging out with green Slaad is a good idea because they generally live longer. So the green Slaad generally slowly transform over hundreds of years into a grey Slaad, and grey Slaad have far more power and so their innate spellcasting improves, and they also take up the use of Greatsword in 5th edition, but there's not a huge amount of difference other than their base stats get better. They get weaker, interestingly. So the green Slaad has a strength of 18 and the grey Slaad has a strength of 17. However, their intelligence is increased, and their charisma is increased, and just generally they have better night vision, dark vision, that sort of thing, and greater oomph. And it's mainly a plot sort of difference between the two, that the grey Slaad would have control over vast amounts of green and red and blue Slaad. Now, eventually, the grey Slaad will go off into it will seclude itself to perfect its darkness. It basically turns into a Dark Lord of the Sith and goes off into the negative planes of existence and learns the darkest, deepest, most horrific forms of magic. And when it comes back, it's a Death Slaad. And there's only about 12 or so Death Slaad in all creation. If a green Slaad eats a Death Slaad entirely, it will transform into. If a grey Slaad eats a Death Slaad, it will transform instantly into a Death Slaad itself. So they've got all the same abilities, even more magic. They've got a strength of 20, intelligence of 15, constitution 19. They're generally just very strong, powerful individuals. They're the boss Slaad, and one thing they left out in 5th edition was the ability of Slaad to gate in other Slaad, which I think is one of the more interesting aspects of the early editions of the Slaad. So you could do that if you wanted to. Generally speaking, a lesser Slaad like a red or a blue would only be able to gate in a red or a blue. Green would be able to gate in a few reds or blues. Greys would be able to do the same, and Death Slaad would be able to gate in squadrons of any different type of Slaad, but not a great amount of greys. Could certainly gate in greens, reds and blues. Probably not other Death Slaad as well, because the Death Slaad are independent operators, that just work to propagate their race. So what the Slaad do, generally speaking, is they'll scavenge the borders of the blood war between the demons and devils, and they will victimize villages and things like that have been left unprotected. So they are a random act of lethal brutality and a horrific end to anybody who falls victim to them. They are a savage race of frog-like beings that will appear from out of nowhere and devastate the community and kill everyone or take others for captives, and always on the sniffing around looking for magic users. And their end means, of course, is just to propagate their race, become dominant through sheer numbers and have some sort of weird hierarchy where the dark death Slaads rule with an iron fist over their lesser progeny. And that is the Slaad for you. Interesting race, definitely a long-standing favourite of most planeswalking GMs. And yeah, if you've used them in your game, interestingly, let me know in the comment section below.